Mayor Pete, good to see you. You have been bandied about as a possible running mate choice for Vice President Harris. So have you been contacted by the campaign, and would you be interested in serving in that role?
Look, I think anybody would be flattered to be mentioned in that context. I certainly am. There's really not much more that I can or should say about that process other than that she's going to make that decision and she knows what she's doing. What I know is that I'm really excited in whatever capacity to be part of this campaign. And I'm one of millions of Democrats who are clearly energized and fired up. There's just a new energy, and it's been extraordinary to me how quickly she has gathered the party around her with a sense of mission, a clear message, just in a matter of days. And of course, I'm thrilled to be part of that.
It seems as if that sense of mission and enthusiasm has rattled Republicans, at least for the moment. And as we covered earlier in the show, Donald Trump and his campaign have suggested that he may not follow through with the debate in September that had been scheduled to be with President Biden. Now, of course, would be the vice president, assuming she does wrap up the nomination as expected. What do you make of that?
It's extraordinary. Tough talk is this guy's calling card. And now there's this extraordinary show of weakness. He agreed to, he said anytime, any place. But more than that, he agreed to this specific debate on this specific network on this specific date. And now he's pulling out. And of course, it shows that he's afraid. It shows that he knows if the two of them are on a stage together, it's not going to end well for him. This is a campaign that really has struggled to be about anything but Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And I think that's the bigger pattern that you're seeing here, and part of why the Trump campaign is having such a hard time adapting. Think about it. Just in a matter of 2 or 3 days, our campaign adapted to literally the biggest possible change, which is a change in the top of the ticket. And yet, within a couple of days, that support consolidated and that message was clear. They, meanwhile, have been flailing in a way that shows they're unable to adapt. And to me, it's not just that their entire strategic apparatus was built around tearing down Joe Biden. I think there's something deeper, which is Donald Trump cannot conceive of a campaign that isn't about the candidate. We're obviously very excited about our candidate. Kamala Harris is a leader that everybody is pulling together around, but also she's articulating a message that isn't just about herself and certainly isn't just about Donald Trump, although she has that contrast down. It's about us. And that's the kind of campaign that wins. It's the right kind of campaign, and it's also one that literally does not compute for somebody like Donald Trump.
So you, of course, just mentioned the huge change at the top of the ticket, a seismic change, a dizzying week of change. For you yourself, on Friday night, you appeared real time with Bill Maher talking about President Biden, advocating for his candidacy, wanting him to stay in the race. And then, of course, 2 days later, he announced he is bowing out. What has this week been like for you?
Well, obviously, it's been intense. It's been emotional, especially watching President Biden's Oval Office address, watching him do what is so incredibly rare, which is for a leader with that kind of responsibility and power to lay it aside, to relinquish the nomination, focus on leading the country. And again, the words that most spoke to me was when he said that sacred trust in our democracy, he said, it's not about me, it's about you and your families. And it reminded me why I'm so proud to be part of that team. But the other thing I would say is while the top of our ticket has changed, of course, the values have not. And I'm especially excited to see the way she's leaning into freedom, a value and a theme that, as you know, really for years and back to my own presidential campaign, it's frustrated me that conservatives tried to monopolize the language around freedom. I think they have even more completely relinquished any claim to being able to talk about freedom when they got into banning books. And she has spoken so powerfully, as she did yesterday when she was addressing America's teachers, to the fact that if you mean business when it comes to protecting our kids, you shouldn't be protecting our kids from Toni Morrison. You should be protecting our kids from assault weapons.
So, Pete, historian John Meacham has the next question for you.
Mr. Mayor, quick question. You are an anomaly in that you are a young person in politics and public service who seems to actually enjoy it. I'm wondering, given the course of the 21st century, given the fact that the public arena again and again has proven to not be commensurate to what people want. We begin with the terrible attacks. We go through insurrection. What's the story, now that you've been mayor, you've been in a big job, what's the story you tell about why politics, why public service matters?
You know, it's a great point. Like, generationally, I think anyone my age and younger, especially in the first part of this century, witnessed a lot of policy failure. So part of my message, my antidote to that, is to look at what's been achieved these last few years, and most importantly, what that could point to for the future. I think about my own trajectory. The fact that just the fact of somebody like me being able to have a role like I do or run a campaign like we did would have been considered preposterous just 10 or 20 years ago. I think of the trajectory of South Bend, Indiana, where I served as mayor and where I grew up, a place that in less than a decade changed the narrative about that from being written up in national commentaries as a dying Rust Belt city to being a city that was growing and was being regarded as a place full of innovation and energy. And of course, I think about serving in a Biden-Harris administration and watching what happened. I mean, take infrastructure, right, where there was this belief that you just couldn't, even though there was this thing that obviously needed to be done, and yet it just couldn't happen. No president could get it through. Definitely couldn't happen on a bipartisan basis, only to see the Biden-Harris administration deliver that. And I think that lights the way toward what is possible. And as you mentioned, there's also just something in this moment, just this week's moment, about that idea of enjoying this a little more. Politics doesn't have to be a death match. You know, we have certainly seen and had cause for being extremely troubled and disturbed by what's coming out of the other side. I think we continue to be right to talk about the threat and the concern for our democracy. If you have a guy like Donald Trump who inspired the January 6th riots and attempt against our democracy, somebody who talks about terminating the Constitution and said that a political opponent of his ought to be brought before a military tribunal. Like, that's really dark. But the other side of the coin is the joy of the right and better kind of politics. And we've seen that throughout the week. And again, it's something that I think is animating our side and that the other side literally can't conceive. And that's why some of their attacks that have fallen flat kind of reveal that there's just a different energy, a different vibe over there. The fact that they, for example, clip and tweet images of Kamala Harris laughing as if that's something that counts against her shows that they literally are having trouble just getting the idea of there being joy in the struggle and in the challenge. But I think that's something that speaks more to the campaign than voters. I think there are a lot of independents and what I always like to call future former Republicans who would rather just sign up and be part of this project than continue to be part of this doom-filled whatever we saw at the RNC.
Pete Buttigieg, thank you for joining us this morning, again, in his personal capacity. We appreciate it.
Thanks.